Welcome to the Center for Security Policy. I'm Clare Lopez, a senior fellow at the center and a former CIA operations officer.
And I'm Fred Fleitz. I'm also a senior fellow with the center and a former CIA analyst.
Today we'd like to talk about the NSA reforms, and specifically new reforms that have just been introduced recently by the White House and the House Intelligence Committee. Fred, what can you tell us about those new reforms that have been proposed?
Well, there's been a lot of developments recently, Claire. These reforms are necessary because of leaks that occurred by Edward Snowden, who stole 1.6 million classified documents and compromised some very sensitive NSA programs. The most prominent one is something called the metadata program. This is a program where the National Security Agency collects hundreds of millions of phone records, not the contents of phone calls, and does a complex analysis to make connections to establish terrorist connections and relationships. Well, some people think this constituted domestic spying, even though over 35 separate court cases said it did not. But nevertheless, there's been a growing outrage over this program, and in response to that, there are now at least two major proposals on the table right now to rein in this program. One was put forward by President Obama, and this proposal is to move the metadata to the phone companies, and if the NSA wants to query this data, they would have to get a court order from the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court to access the data. The House Intelligence Committee has another proposal. They would also move the data to the phone companies, but it would be the NSA would be permitted to query the data based on a general warrant that would be provided by the FISA court in advance. When the House Intelligence Committee asked for the data, they would carbon copy the court, and the court could block a request if they wanted to. But the main difference is that the House Intelligence Committee proposal would allow this data to be accessed a little bit more quickly than the Obama administration proposal. Both, frankly, in my opinion, are imperfect. Now, you and I did some substantial reports for the Center that are on the Center for Security Policy website where we looked at this in depth. It's going to be a problem that NSA is not going to have direct access to this data, that they're going to have to go to the phone companies. There's also a real concern that more people will be involved in processing this data, and I think this creates the possibility for real compromises of American privacy. But we are where we are, and I think if a proposal is going to be adopted, the House Intelligence Committee proposal is probably the best that we can do.
Well, and Fred, going forward, what would you say, in addition to the effect of these proposals, if they are indeed enacted, are there any other impending intelligence reforms along these lines, or should there be different proposals than is the kind of proposals covered in these two that we're talking about?
Well, there's several other proposals being considered. The President asked a panel to provide recommendations for him last August. They gave a report in December, which, again, you and I analyzed for the Center for Security Policy. Some of these proposals weren't bad. That is, improving the security of classified systems, the process for providing clearances to intelligence officers, how Snowden could steal so many documents despite the fact he was released by the Central Intelligence Agency for cause, and NSA did not know this, which hired him after CIA. Intelligence contractor did not know this. This is a real problem that has to be addressed urgently. I'm worried there are more Snowdens out there. But there are other proposals that are very, very troubling. The one that comes to mind immediately is extending privacy rights to foreigners. This was a recommendation by the President's panel that the President seems to have endorsed, at least in part. And this comes from the controversy that NSA allegedly listened in on the phone calls from the cell phone of Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, possibly French and Brazilian leaders, and that the United States has been listening into phone conversations of many Europeans. This has created outrage in Europe and calls that this type of espionage should be banned. I'm very troubled that we seem to be moving in the direction of making it difficult to collect against our allies. In a perfect world, we wouldn't be listening into the Chancellor of Germany and the President of France. But realistically, there have been times in the past where we've had real differences with these countries. I would remind you that during the Iraq War, France and Germany were collaborating with the Russians against us in Iraq, and I hope NSA was listening into those conversations because the lives of American soldiers were on the line. There's also calls to make the Internet a spy-free zone because of allegations that NSA is listening into or monitoring Internet communications. And maybe it would be a good idea, according to Internet activists and the President's panel, to have an international treaty making the Internet a spy-free zone. Give me a break. We'd be one of the only countries that would abide by such a thing, and you can be sure our adversaries, especially Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran, they will be laughing themselves silly as they continue to exploit the Internet to spy on us while we put ourselves in some kind of a box, preventing us from defending our national security.
These are serious and complicated questions, Fred, and I think we need to be sure that we at the Center stay focused on these questions going forward. But thank you very much today for your insights on these issues.
It's great to be here.